Hey guys, welcome into the Bear With Us podcast. I'm Jack. He is Frank. Today we're actually going to be talking some Bears, finally. I know a lot of people have been wanting us to get back to that a little bit, but there really wasn't anything to talk about. So, Frankie, got a couple of things that have happened since our last episode. Let's start with the most, I guess you could call important for the Bears' future. Last week, it was reported that the Bears had actually been talking with the town of Naperville in regards to potentially getting a stadium built there. Arlington Heights and the Chicago Bears aren't quite seeing eye to eye on who should be paying for the fucking stadium. Should it be people like me who live in Arlington Heights, or should it be the billionaire owners who own a football team and people like myself won't see any of the profits? Probably I would lean a certain direction, Frank. I'm curious. What do you think about this? Like the Bears spent $200 million on the property, the Arlington racetrack already. They've started demolition. They basically said, hey, the land isn't worth what we thought it was. Let's look elsewhere. Let's explore other options. Frank, what is this? Do you think this is real? Are you upset? Are you mad? Are you just like, who cares? What do you think?
I mean, this is very clear to me that this is just a negotiation tactic. I think they're a little bit too deep into the development of what they have going on. I think they've had too many talks. You know, they spent too much money already to absolutely let it go. But I think you leave that door open to, if Naperville or if someone else says, hey, we'll do exactly what you want and maybe this piece of land is better, you do leave that open to actually leaving. But they're just building they're building leverage. That's all that is. Like that was the clear play to me, and the only sort of pushback that I saw from that is what was, I don't know if I saw it on Reddit or Twitter or what, but they were like, well, if everyone knows it's leverage, then it's not real leverage, and it's like, that's not true. It's the same thing. People try to say that about the Bears as the number one pick. If everyone knows they're not going to get the number one, or they're not going to draft a quarterback, why in the world would anyone trade up to number one? And then here comes the fucking Panthers, like, here's your wide receiver one and multiple first round picks. Like, this is what you do. Because again, it's not finalized to go there. So what do you do when the deal isn't all to your liking? You go elsewhere and see if you can get something done. Whether that is because, you think you can find something that is a better deal, better land, whatever the sort of deal is with taxpayer dollars, or to bring it back, to actually do it, or to bring it back to them and say, look, they're going to do this. And even though we've invested 200 mil or whatever it is, that's a drop in the bucket. Like, we will go here. And you sort of bring that back to the negotiation table. But I think really the last thing, Jackie, that you touched on, because I have seen that. And I think anyone who knows me on any sort of personal level knows that I side with you here of like, why are taxpayers even remotely paying for a dime of this, right? It should be the billionaire owners. But has that ever happened in America? I think the deal that the Bears are looking for is the exact deal that every other team in every pro sport does. It's always been taxpayer stuff. And, here's where it gets to be way over my head. I'm not an econ guy. I don't really know, much about anything in that lane, but I know it's like something to do with like property taxes and I don't know, they put like voucher. I was trying to keep up with this Twitter thread that was sort of breaking down what different ways that you can do and what the city is trying to, and I was like, I was sort of lost, but all in all, I do know that every single stadium is built using that format, correct? Like, there's never been a stadium that's like the billionaire's like, nope, fuck it, I'll foot the bill. Like, let's do it. It just doesn't happen.
Well, a perfect example is the Bills just yesterday. Well, not just yesterday, but they were there to break ground on their new stadium in New York. The state of New York is providing $850 million in public funding.
And that's what I mean.
One of the best deals in the history of sports. Socialized cost, privatized profit. That's a tweet from Andrew Brandt, who is kind of like an insider in the NFL. He's like he used to work in the NFL. I believe he used to work for ESPN too. But yeah, he makes a great point. The people are paying for this public stadium, but guess who's going to keep all the money?
Yeah.
The Bills.
It's absurd. And you know what that reminds me of, Jack? And not to get too far off course, but it's not like we have a robust, agenda to get to today. But I watched it. Have you watched any of those? There was a couple of documentaries that came out about the opioid epidemic.
Yeah.
The one that I saw was a Netflix one. The greatest crime of the century, something crime of the century.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
something like that. And that was literally my first thought when they were talking about, after the court cases. Oh, the state of whatever it was won, $500 million was paid out, and I was like, who gets that money? Do the families get this money? Do the people who suffered from this epidemic get that money? Like where does that money go? It's like monopoly at that point. It just goes to the state government, and what do they do with it? Like, we have no idea where that money goes. And it's like the same thing here. Like, here goes all of our taxpayer dollars. Here's your new stadium. We get nothing from that.
You get the tourism money dollars. However, I've never seen.
Yeah, but like, and it's like let's live in the world though that would affect people outside of like local or state government that may help, like locally owned restaurants or hotels, motels, right? Like, that's still a small percentage of people that you're helping, and you probably took more money out of their pockets than you. I mean, how long would you take to get out of the red there if you were actually like itemizing out? I paid this amount of property tax for the land that I own for my restaurant or my business or whatever. Here were the profits that I made, and how could you even like tell like, well, X percentage were from tourists? You know what I mean? Like it's just silly. I don't understand it.
I've never received a check in the mail any other time than when I do my taxes in every April. That's the only time I ever see a check back for putting stuff in. Nothing ever feels like it's goes down in cost, which is what you'd expect if you don't have to pay as much in taxes because they're generating so much revenue from the stadium. I mean, it's silly is what it is that you expect. And Arlington, good on Arlington Heights for basically saying, nah, fuck you guys. Build your own fucking stadium. And you know what? If the McCaskies can't afford to build the stadium, sell to someone who can.
Yeah,
that should pretty much be I don't like the public having to fund their own stadium, especially when it's like forced on a town. Not saying that the Bears necessarily are, but like, I don't decide where the Bears go. Right. So the people who've been living here for 10, 15, 20 years never would have thought the Bears would come to Arlington Heights. And now that they are, they're the ones who are going to have to pay for it because the Bears deemed it as the location is viable. Yeah. I just don't get how that makes sense.
I mean, you would think, because, well, firstly, I agree with that. But again, I only revert to my point, and it's not to rebut by any means, but like, the Bears, the McCaskies aren't the only family or the only ownership group doing this. I don't think... I
was just using them as an example because...
No, absolutely. And again, right on its face, I totally agree with you. But then sort of digging a little bit deeper, like, why wouldn't there be... You have a club of 32 billionaires, well, maybe more if, there's an ownership group for different... It's not just one person that owns it, but...
Right.
I mean, let's just say 50, 60, whatever it is, billionaires. Why aren't y'all, like, partnered with, I don't know, Chase or like some sort of bank that gives you these sort of loans, and I mean, maybe you sort of socialize it from there. You socialize it between the 50 billionaires who all have ownership shares, in these 32 teams instead of like just normal regular people. I mean, because realistically, you have people, who don't watch football that are paying for that. Like, I guess what I'm saying is maybe if you were to crowdfund from people who were like, oh, we're going to go to games, we're Bears fans, we support this move, I still would be against it. Like, why are you taking from people who don't have nearly the amount of money as you? But at the very least, you're getting money from people who like the move. But realistically, you're also taking from people who don't give a fuck about either the Bears themselves or this move. They don't care where they go. So it's like, you all have, I guess the ultimate point I'm making is, you all as these billionaire owners have this vested interest. Figure it the fuck out. Whether that means the family itself has to buy it or you all come... as the corporation has some sort of agreement or deal with a bank that can give you a no interest loan or...
Well, and it's not like they're not getting any partnerships either, to your point. Like, because the whole thing is that it's not just going to be Bears games, right? The whole point of the stadium is to bring in NCAA tournaments. It's to bring in concerts. It's so Taylor Swift can come, right down the road from Soldier Field, selling out Soldier Field, and then boom, pop over to Arlington Heights, where a lot more people are probably more.
There's going to be a horse track too, isn't there? There's going to be racing and shit.
There's going to be a lot. There's going
Gambling.
to be a ton that the stadium, a built-in probably casino, I would imagine, or at least some sort of place where you could go and place your bets, things like that. And so it's not like it's just the McCaskies. They have those partnerships. I think it's just interesting that socialism is terrible, horrible, all the way bad until the billionaire owners do it, and then everybody sticks up for them because they want their football team near their house. Like, can we just admit that socialism is how these billionaire owners keep all of their money and everything? No, we don't want to admit that. Okay, we'd rather talk about how Justin Fields is a running back. Got it. No problem. No problem. I gotcha.
And that's sports. Back to you, Jim, for the weather.
No, but let's be real. The Bears will be in Arlington Heights. Like, I just find it hilarious that the first town that was reported was Naperville, and Naperville was like, listen, we don't have the space for it, but we'll knock down literally any building you tell us. and we'll build whatever you want. You tell us what we'll build. It's good stuff.
But you know what, though? I do wonder. I did think there were some pretty good conversations on Twitter that I saw, Bears Twitter anyway, revolving around this. Does this potentially leave the door open for Chicago to say, hey, here's a space of land and, you can actually own it? Because it's not going to be Soldier Field. They're not going to renovate it. That's off the table. But people were actually identifying pretty big pieces of land by the lake. I don't know who owns it, if it's just the city or whoever else, but potentially is that maybe Brandon Johnson's way in?
Yeah, I mean, it's not unrealistic if they can get a good size. And again, if they do own because that's the biggest issue, right? They want to own everything. They don't want to just own part of it. They want to own everything. That was the whole point of them wanting to get out of the city. I don't know, man. I just think the Arlington Heights stuff, you already spent $200 million. What are you going to do? Flip it? Just sell what you bought for a fraction of the price? What other association is going to buy that land? That's my question. Who else is going to want that much land? The White Sox? They're not fucking paying for that shit. Jerry Reinsdorf will not ever move. His stadium deal that he has is literally, it doesn't matter who goes to games. His stadium is literally bulletproof. Why would he move? There's no other Chicago team that's looking to move. The Cubs have obviously done all of this renovation at Wrigley. The United Center isn't going anywhere. What other organization could use that much land? I don't see it.
That much land, I don't think any other one, but I think one that would be looking for land potentially would be the Chicago Fire. That's a little bit of, I don't want to say inside info, but the organization that I work with is working with their nonprofit, and they've been talking about moving for years. They hate where they're at right now. I don't know if it's location,
tell you where they're at.
But even then, they don't need. They would buy maybe half of that. They would need a parking lot in the stadium just like they have now.
Yeah. I think the Arlington Heights stuff is too much down the road. I think we're pretty much already past that point. You don't spend $200 million and then just say, so Arlington Heights will have to make a decision whether, or they could let the Bears basically say, all right, well, I mean, you gave us $200 million. We'll use that elsewhere. Good luck. And then they'll move on.
But you know what, though? The deal is going to get done. It's going to move there. The taxpayers are going to pay for it in some form or fashion. The only thing I don't know, this is where my ignorance comes into play, and people who probably are in this field, they're going to listen to this first however many minutes and be like, these guys are fucking idiots, and because we're not experts either.
Well,
but I do.
That anyways. I do. That anyways, regardless.
That's true, but I do wonder. This has to be a negotiation tactic on their end. What does the city? What does that county want? The Bears to concede on? I wonder. That's the part where I just have no idea about land ownership from the city and who does what with, what I mean?
Yeah. We'll have to see. But in the meantime, we do actually have some Bears things that we did want to discuss. Frank. The OTAs took place, voluntary OTAs. There were some news and notes. Kevin Fishbane wrote an article on The Athletic, so we just wanted to kind of go through his. He listed 7 big important things he brought up, so I figured we should talk a little bit about that. So let's go ahead and get into some football news, because that's, obviously what people are probably more here for, as opposed to talking a little bit more about the stadium. First things first, before we get started, is there anything better than while you're sitting there watching stupid baseball and getting pissed because both of the teams in this town just fucking suck and everything's a joke and no team is good in this city and it's horrible and awful and just bad? Is there anything better than seeing just a clip of Justin Fields just throwing a strike to DJ Moore for a touchdown?
Listen, that connection, that's going to be a fantasy championship winner.
I think people are. It's weird because I feel like people are sleeping on DJ Moore a little bit, and I think obviously that comes with how you feel about Justin Fields as a passer. But I agree. I've liked what I've heard. They've talked about the connection they've already been building in OTAs. It's going to get that much stronger. Obviously, we'll see kind of how they implement him in that offense. But I don't know. I just like seeing little quick highlights of
same. Well,
the guys that I want to see catching touchdowns.
No, I agree with you. And the thing is I think it was Adam Hogue tweeted out, and I know they both said this on their podcast, that the coaches are saying the right things, they're saying what they always say, but much to their surprise, they were like, what we saw in these open practices was that. Yeah. And they were like, we saw this with when people would say, oh, Jay Cutler's finally turning that corner, and we went and we're like, he looks like the same guy, and then Mitch, he's taking that next step, and it's like, this looks worse than last year. And not much was said in last year's OTAs. This is a new regime. They didn't really know what they had, so it was more of we're going to work hard, and the hits principle stuff and all that was there. But now you got these guys saying Justin looks better. This offense is, in year 2 of this system, and they would straight up were like, we weren't expecting anything, but what we saw on the field was very, very good. And I think it's easy to chalk it up and say, oh, it's just OTAs, and that's true. But what's happening right now is better than if it were to be well, they look even worse than last year, or they look the exact same. Progress is going to show in many different ways, and OTA is just the first step. So obviously you're going to want to see what they look like in the preseason, and obviously once we get into the regular season, or even the joint practices if they're going to do that again this year. You want to see progress all the way through. But again, I don't get how, there are people who were just upset about it. Of course they're going to say that, and their coaching staff is just hyping people up. And it's sure they are, but if you have reporters legitimately saying, yes, this looks different, this looks better, that's a good thing. It can't be a bad thing.
Yeah, you'd rather have this looks good as opposed to no, this doesn't look good. You'd rather have the positives coming through, and you don't want to get too high, like you were saying. It is just OTAs. They're not, maybe 7-on-7 scrimmages. There's not a pass rush. There's not an offensive line. Typically, it's just kind of throw it to the guys and see who makes a play. But I think you brought a perfect segue into something that the defensive coordinator for the Bears, Alan Williams, said about Justin Fields that I think is really interesting, because you kind of compare it to previous regimes, specifically Mitch Trubisky. I'll get to him in a second. But Alan Williams was asked what he saw or what he's seen so far from Justin Fields, and he said, leadership, good decision-making. I see improved accuracy. That's what you want in your quarterback. And how fast he's processing from day one to right now, I see how he's grown. I think that's really important, Frank. And granted, yes, everybody hypes up your team. Nobody loses in OTAs. Nobody's bad in OTAs. Everything is great. Everything's awesome. It's just like the draft, right? You just drafted 7 Hall of Famers, maybe more, depending on how many draft picks your team had. But I think it's just the stark difference from years past, where you think of Vic Fangio, when he was asked what he's seen improvement-wise from Mitch Trubisky, and he was basically like, I coach the defense. All right. Don't ask me about the quarterback. I'm not watching. I'm coaching the defense. Where it's okay, he probably was watching his defense absolutely just kick the shit out of the quarterback. It was oh shit, here we go. But the fact that Alan Williams isn't just talking about like, oh, he just looks better mechanically or this, or like he's specifically talking about how Justin Fields has improved his processing speed. Coming from a defensive coordinator, I think that's really, really important.
No, I totally agree. And again, that's one of those things where the coaches are generally either going to give you a non-answer or a very positive answer at this time of the year, no matter who it is. I mean, there were quotes coming out about Mike Glennon, when the Bears had signed him. And, it's better than what we thought, better than expected, better than advertised. And, okay, we get it. And, but the sort of confirmation of that is when because the Chicago media can be very, very tough on people. I mean, even Hogan Johns, when they were there, they were ripping Mitch. And they're not mean people naturally, so they weren't like really digging in, but they were being brutally honest about what they saw in these practices. Just him looking way behind, him looking like he made zero progress.
Off the TV?
Yeah, exactly. So, the overall point that I'm making there is like, you can take the coach's words with a grain of salt. When you compare that in this market to what the reporters are seeing and it's similar things, those are drastically different sources. Coaches, again, are always going to be positive this time of the year or just like non-answer type of stuff. The reporters will not be. They're not patient, especially not in Chicago. It's very similar to the New York market where one little thing goes wrong, you're going to get blasted, especially this time of the year where there's nothing else to talk about. You're going to be on the fucking front page or back page, whatever it is, of the sports section on the Sun-Times. Like, it just is what it is. And the fact that both of them are essentially saying the same things, that's huge.
Yeah, and I think it's too specific for it almost to not be at least true. And granted, it might be true. It still is just the OTAs. Maybe Justin is processing a little bit faster because there isn't, guys rushing him. His offensive line isn't getting beat, things like that. But I think it sounds like his decision-making is very much improved. And the answer was more detailed than just your traditional, he's taking it seriously. Looks great. He looks athletic. He's
ready to make the leap.
Yeah, he's ready to make the leap. That type of shit. We did get from Tyler Scott. We got our patented last one, our first one in, last one out for Justin Fields. So good. We got that. We could check that box off that our quarterback is in fact staying late, getting there early. So we got that one. Frankie, there was some other conversations to be had in this article from Kevin Fishbane regarding the Bears OTAs. Starting with the number one thing, Frank, was unfortunate. Maybe fortunately, we'll get to it. I guess I shouldn't assume what you think. However, we do pretty much have 100% confirmation that Kyler Gordon will be solely focused on playing the slot corner nickel position in the defense this year. Frank, we talked about it a little bit during the draft, drafting a nickel corner over, potentially game-changing wide receivers. What do you think? Are you okay with Kyler? Have you come to terms with Kyler Gordon seemingly playing the nickel? Obviously, it's a very important position. We know Kenny Moore of the Indianapolis Colts was a Pro Bowler in that defense, playing that position. So we know that it's a very important role for the defense. How do you feel about Kyler Gordon seemingly having all of his growth more focused in the nickel?
Well, I mean, it sort of all hit me when the Bears drafted Tyreek Stevenson. That was when it was like, because Kyler played the nickel like 75% or 80% of his reps in game last year. And that was when we saw a lot of Jalen Jones, and we saw who was the other kid that made some decent plays at the end of the year. I'm blanking on his name. We hated him before this year, and he had a couple solid games actually.
Now I'm gonna have to look it up.
His name is Kendall Vildor.
There you go.
And it was because Kyler was playing pretty well as the third corner. Well, I don't want to say necessarily the third, because the other thing is the Bears were in the nickel like 70% of the time. Like they were in it the majority of the time. It's just a passing league. I guess where I'm at, I've come to terms with him being the nickel. I don't know. You glance around the league and you see guys who are really good nickel corners, and they're not all like highly drafted. Maybe this where the league is at with it being such a pass heavy league now and the rules continuing to, cater to the quarterback and cater to the passing game, maybe that's just what it's going to be. But I have a hard time believing you couldn't find a good nickel in the 4th or the 5th in one of these, in one of these drafts. And I know you even brought up like the other corner that they drafted. They're high on him as well. I think you can find talent specifically for the nickel later than the 2nd. But all in all, again, as soon as we drafted the corner in the 2nd round this past year, I knew that was what was going to happen. And maybe I was a little bit more upset than I should have been. But I mean, we weren't, when the Bears drafted Kyler Gordon, we were not sold that he was a nickel. He was drafted as an outside guy. And then last year's OTAs, they saw he sprinkled in. He was a little bit of everywhere. Maybe he's just going to be this versatile guy who, really good ball skills, and he's just going to be a playmaker. And he was there essentially all year from like mid-year on. But the thing is, too, it's a double-edged sword, and I hate to be too harsh because that's when he started to shine, really, is when he started to essentially only be the nickel. So, yeah. It is what it is. I'm like, I've accepted it. I don't think it's the worst of things because if you have 3 really good corners out there, you're in good shape. But to be honest with you, I think it all depends on how good Jalen Johnson is. And I don't know if he's one of the points later in the article. Maybe we touch on him a little bit later. But he's the one that's going to drive everything. I equate him to DJ Moore. If he's a CB1, the other 2 I love. I think talent-wise they're perfect for where they're at. If he's not that good of a corner, if he has a drop-off year or he just continues to be hurt, I think we're going to be in bad shape.
So there's a couple things that I think was really interesting in regards to Kyler Gordon playing the nickel. One thing is that unfortunately he's not going to play every single snap unless they are maybe going to be a little bit more flexible with him on the outside, depending on how Tyreek Stevenson and Terrell Smith, their 5th-round pick.
Terrell Smith, I couldn't think of his name.
End up looking. Right? Kendall Vildor, if he makes that jump, and then Jalen Jones, another guy that you and I came around to by the end of the year after he played a little bit better football. It's just, if Kyler Gordon is one of their more athletic corners, one of their better defensive backs, can you really justify not having him on the field every single snap? That's kind of where I'm curious where that comes in. However, one of the things that I think Kyler Gordon did really well throughout the year, and probably between him and Brisker, ended up actually being 2 of the better blitzers on the team. Kyler Gordon, that's like one of his best traits that I didn't really expect from last year, but he attacks the football. He's a very good blitzer, and he plays more physical than I thought he would have. So I think the nickel is a good spot for him. But I agree with you. I don't necessarily think that they needed to draft. I'm curious about Ryan Pohl's process in his first draft, especially not having a 1st-round pick. Maybe he was just going best player available as opposed to, worrying about necessarily the position because he understood big picture how much help this team was going to need. It's just a difference of opinion between you and I on what exactly that looks like. But that being said, I think if the skill set matches where they want him to play and he ends up taking a step and becomes one of the more productive nickel corners in the league, ultimately you can't really be too mad about it, right?
Yeah. I also wonder how much of it was they did draft him to be an outside guy. And I mean, we heard this a lot last year, and this is how Tevin Jenkins wound up at guard. Was we are going to see who everyone's best position, where everyone fits best, and that's what they're going to play. And maybe that's just what wound up happening. They were just trying people out, and they were like, man, he's a good outside corner, but he's an even better nickel, and we're just going to stick him there. And that could have also happened as well, because it sounds like that's what their process at least was year 1. I don't know if that's going to continue to be the case, but they evaluated everybody to a point where, like, they were trying Larry Borum out at guard during OTAs and such. So, maybe that's what wound up happening too. And if that is the case, I think that's more of a good thing than a bad.
Speaking of Jalen Johnson, I know that was something you brought up. He was the second main subject that Kevin Fishbane brought up, his absence from OTAs. Luckily, today we actually had some resolution to that. Jalen Johnson is back at Bears practice at OTAs. He was out there last year, entering the final year of his rookie contract. He was still working with the group, working with coaches, doing Zoom, things like that. So even when he wasn't there last week, he was still being a part of the team, which is something I really like. They actually didn't. I don't think that Eberflus expected him to be there for OTAs. I think he more expected him to be around for mandatory minicamp. I think it's kind of great that he's at OTAs. Frank, were you worried that he wasn't showing up? Did you think there was anything really to it? What do you kind of think about Jalen Johnson not being there and then showing up a week later?
Well, when I first heard it, I think you're always a little bit worried, especially because he's due for a contract. Is this a holdout situation, and particularly with him, I don't know if he's really earned CB1 number. So unless him and his agent are being fair and sort of getting what I think and probably what the front office thinks at this point is fair, I think showing up is a good thing because you want to earn more money versus hold out for probably what you're not worth. But then he went on the radio. I forgot what radio station it was, or it was some interview. I don't want to even say it was the radio. And he was just like, look, I've been a part of Zoom meetings. I'm there. I still talk to my teammates. He's like, I just want to spend an extra week with my daughter. And I was like, I'm never going to knock that. Like, I'm a dad now. You're going to be a dad soon. Like, at that point, you being engaged over Zoom and everything is just a cherry on top. If you want to spend an extra week and skip non-mandatory stuff, I don't think I have no problem with that, especially because you sort of proved that to be right. You came when it was time for the mandatory portion. You haven't caused a ruckus. You're there. I mean, do your thing. You know what I mean? So I can't lie and act like, oh, I was just a wait and see. When I first heard it, I was like, fuck, this is going to be another Roquan situation, isn't it? And it wasn't. I don't think he lied about anything that he said on that interview that I saw. It had to have been a week ago now. I mean, did you feel any differently?
I mean, the one thing that I will say is I don't think he had earned the almost the right to necessarily do if he was holding out. Like, at least when Roquan was doing it, Roquan had proven to be a very productive player. I still think Jalen Johnson can be a very good cornerback. We just haven't seen him become like a star level player, right, like teams would covet the way that they did Roquan Smith. So I was a little concerned about that, but I'm glad to see that it really feels like the culture of the team has changed, which is great. I think it's super important. Again, it's June 6th. If missing 1 week of OTAs by Jalen Johnson determined the outcome of this season for the Bears or for himself, I think there are more problems than we probably suspect. So I didn't think it was really anything. Obviously, it wasn't. He's already back. Great to hear. One thing that maybe has a little more concern is the fact that Nate Davis, the new starting right guard that the Bears picked up in free agency, he was also missing from OTAs. And I was taking a look today. I was trying to figure it out. I don't see anything that suggested that he would be here today. Could still be recovering from injury. That he went under ankle surgery in 2022. The end of 2022. And we haven't really heard anything. Matt Eberflus hasn't really said shit about Nate Davis. So I don't know, Frank, are you a little more worried about Nate Davis missing than Jalen Johnson? Do you feel kind of the same as that situation?
Well, no, you brought up my worry. A brand new free agent not showing up to OTAs, you're not holding out for anything. That to me tells me that ankle that he had at the end of last year isn't where it needs to be. And the fact that, Eberflus or really Ryan Poles have even said anything about it, I think they're having him just not show up. Because to me, it would look worse that your new starting right guard is just sitting on the sidelines for OTAs, potentially with like a brace on. I don't know. I haven't seen him, in public or anything, but just not practicing. Versus you being at home and people just speculating what it could be. So yeah, I'm a little bit worried. I know it's super early, but the injury happened so long ago. You'd have thought, he would be at the very least like participating in light warm up stuff or just being on the field. And yeah, I'm a little worried there, Jack. Are you as well?
Yeah, one quote from Matt Eberflus that I found interesting was. He said, we certainly feel a little bit more comfortable knowing he has been in the system He knows the zone schemes, the down schemes, and really similar in terms of the line coaching. Obviously, his time in Tennessee, it's very similar to what the Bears do with Luke Getsy. He did say, again, we'd like everybody here. We feel it's invaluable to be here. We'll coach the guys that are here. So that leads me to believe that, quote, that he just decided not to show up. I could be reading into it a little bit more. You could be spot on in terms of maybe they're just keeping him out of practice. But, like, I don't feel like that's something Eberflus wouldn't make it sound like he's, like, anywhere close to throwing him under the bus. Basically, like, he's not here, so we think it's important to be here. He's not here if he was there, right? If he was getting that ankle worked on, things like that. So that makes me a little concerned. Cody Whitehair doesn't sound very concerned about it. Basically just saying he's a professional. He's played in the system. It'll be fine. Again, it's June 6th. But the Bears' biggest issue was the offensive line.
Yep.
Right? And, well, the defensive line, I guess. You can just the lines. Both lines were terrible. We always hear about how important the cohesion is for the offensive line. They really need to gel together. How many injuries did the Bears have on their offensive line last year with guys that they signed in free agency? And granted, they weren't, nowhere near as good, I think, as Nate Davis has been. But this isn't the first time the Bears have signed a guy in a free agency and he's dealt with injuries. You also think of, obviously, Tevin Jenkins' injury history.
Lucas Patrick.
That kind of makes Lucas Patrick, Dakota Dozier, right? That stuff makes me a little bit concerned that he's not practicing. Granted, again, it's June 6th. There's still plenty of time. But obviously I would prefer, and it sounds like Matt Eberflus would prefer him to be there as well.
Yeah, no, and that's why it's really just the injury. Because you just got signed. You're not sitting out, looking for more money or looking for a trade. So, yeah, I mean, but then again, I mean, I know that there may start to be more and more of that from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, year 4 of this regime, because veterans don't always come to this shit. They don't care about it. And he is a veteran who just signed a deal, so he has the leverage to, like, not come if he doesn't want to. I get why it's not the greatest look, but let's just say, like, Eberflus and this regime have so much success. He's here for, like, 12 years. In year 8, he's not going to give a fuck that his veterans aren't there anymore. If Jalen Johnson is on his second contract and he's a stud locking everyone down and he misses, like, who cares, right? So I think he's saying that because of where they're at as a team in their development versus, like, I think it's more about that than it is about Nate Davis on his own, which why to me it's more about the potential nagging injury.
And it's not necessarily the worst thing, right, for veterans to miss practices, because then you can get some more reps for younger guys. The only other thing about the attendance, Kevin Fishbane noted that a couple of guys were there but weren't practicing, but they were present. So guys like Chase Claypool, Donta Foreman, Jack Sanborn, Lucas Patrick, Alex Leatherwood basically said guys get nicked up a little bit this time of the year. We're not going to risk anything. If they have something, we'll sit them out. So really, really no concern, it sounds like, for the guys who did not practice. And again, the fifth thing was the thing about Justin Fields. Alan Williams' comment on Justin Fields. Eberflus said that nobody's worked harder. As I talked about, Tyler Scott also said, hey, this guy's, he's I think it just sounds like he's really growing as a leader. And I just think that's, again, you'd rather hear that stuff than not hear it, right?
Yep. No, I mean, but with that though, Jack, I don't think they're lying. That the hardworking thing has followed him everywhere that he's been. Do you remember when the Bears signed Ryan Poles and he comes into the facility and Justin Fields was literally deadlifting? Like, I don't think that was for the media. I don't know if that was, it doesn't sound like that was planned. Like, he was very, very impressed that this kid's, like, in the weight room, doing his thing. And from the leadership aspect, I think I think we saw a lot of that last year. The few times that cameras cut to him, he was mic'd up. That wasn't his rookie year, was it? I think it was last year. He was mic'd up for a game. again, I think he has every reason to be more and more confident this year, being in year 2 of the system, him really not having to learn, as much. It's more about like solidifying what you know and taking it to that next level. So yeah, you're right. It's one of those things where, I mean, it's the same thing about what we're talking about, with the Alan Williams quote, but it's like, yeah, they can say that, but when you have your teammates doing it, like they weren't doing this for Mitch. Like, and again, I hate that we continue to bring him up. Like he's having a good career as a backup now. He's going to be in the league for a long time as a backup. I think
extended with the
got
Steelers.
Extended with the Steelers. Good for him. But we saw what it was like when it was faked. Oh, the locker room loves him, but then they were split because almost everyone wanted Nick Foles to start over him. Like they know what they saw. Who was asking for PJ Walker? At least at this point, if Justin starts to stink up the place, the locker room will always want the guy that they think they can win with to start. But you're hearing this from everywhere, and then you also take into account so someone on Reddit put together this whole thread of like what opposing players said about Justin Fields, like pretty much unprompted a lot of the times. And it's like, the league likes this kid. People like him. Like that stuff does not go unnoticed. The hard work, the improvement, just the athletic ability, the talent as a quarterback. Like, these are good things to hear. You want to hear this about your quarterback. I mean, we went through a whole Jay Cutler era. And like, the only thing that you heard were people praising his physical talents, not about his hard work, not about how much tape he studied, not about being the first guy in, the last guy out. Like, we didn't hear any of that because it didn't happen. He was our version of Carmelo Anthony, all the talent in the world, and didn't work hard for shit. You know what I mean? And like, I would much rather have this where people see it, notice it, and take note of it.
Yeah, and one other person who made a note of it is John Hoke, the new cornerbacks coach and passing game coordinator. He was on the Falcons defensive staff last year, and they actually played the Falcons last year, if you'll remember. The first thing he said about Justin Fields was he's an accurate thrower, especially with the deep ball. Stop the presses, Frank. What is this man talking about? Don't they know? Doesn't he know that he's a running back and he doesn't throw the deep ball accurately? Come on.
Yeah, they clearly hired the wrong guy.
Yeah, clearly. But he did say he's a little bit more impressive when you see him on a day-to-day basis. So, I mean, that's more of what you'd expect from camp, right? New coaches basically coming in and saying, all the good stuff. But again, you'd rather hear that stuff than what you were just saying, where it's like, yeah, I think Mitch has improved. Okay, what does that mean? I think we'll be better. Okay, got it. No, man, like you're spot on, right? And again, this isn't. It's not stuff we were necessarily waiting for, right? Like the Mitch stuff, we were always kind of like, all right, can Nagy get this guy to be more confident, right? Like, can he get the confidence aspect? Can he make him realize how good he can be? We were kind of just always waiting for that type of stuff with Mitch. Like, is he the leader? We saw the post-game press conferences where he was just the definition of a robot. Just didn't give you anything into him as a person. But like with Justin, we've already kind of seen him be a leader, especially last year. Like, we saw him having a little more fun. We've seen him working hard. We've heard that he's worked hard for almost 2 years now. Like, this isn't anything new. But I think that the fact that he had such a improved season last year, I think he's really got these guys to buy in on him, and he continues to be the hard worker he's always been. And I think it's really, like you said, I think it's really starting to show.
Yeah, and I think, we've also seen him not be robotic in press conferences. I don't remember what game it was last year, but he came to a press conference and he was very clearly distraught. He was very upset about what happened on the field. The Bears lost. I don't remember if it was a performance. It was during that hot streak or not, but he was very upset. I remember that vividly, and he wasn't necessarily giving the best answers at the press conference. And then the very next day he comes back and he apologized. He didn't have to do that. He was like, you know what? I'm sorry, y'all. I was very upset. I let my emotions get the best of me. I'll try not to let that happen again. But it's a very competitive sport, and I'm a competitor, and we've been losing. I think that it was a bad game for him as well, and he was just like, so sorry that happened, but I'm here now. I'm feeling better. Let's talk. We can talk about yesterday's game as well. And it's like we never saw things like that with Jay or with Mitch. Like, Jay had his funny little dry humor moments, but like Mitch had nothing. Everyone only loved when he turned on his little lights on the Christmas sweater, and like even that was robotic. He was like, "Would you like to see the lights?"
The Ditka sweater.
Oh yeah, the Ditka sweater. I mean, but wasn't that like Ditka week? I think everyone had one. But
fucking annoying.
Yeah, I mean, regardless, like we're seeing that sort of personality from him. We're seeing like a mature young professional, just continue to get better, not only at the quarterback position, but just like even in the media. Like the media, I mean, dare I say, overwhelmingly likes him. Well, who's the last quarterback that they liked in Chicago? Like even before, Jay sort of let the city down, if you will. Like I remember after the first press conference when the Bears traded for him, like I was reading the Sun-Times, this when newspapers were huge, and in the Tribune, and they were like bashing him, like he's not built for Chicago, and it's like, God damn, he just got here, like what are you talking about? So yeah, I mean, again, he has shown us not only on the field but off the field that I do think he's a franchise guy.
I think when the team really started to buy, I think one of those moments you're talking about, and one of the more personable moments that I think gives us a really good insight to how Justin Fields looks at the game, takes his performance, his craft seriously, was the game against the Atlanta Falcons. It was that November game where if you remember, he apologized to the defense, and the defense was like, "Stop, do not apologize. You have nothing to apologize for."
Yeah.
Like have you watched how bad we've been? And like Alan Williams was also saying again, he said he was sad that he was apologizing. And again, he said if you saw the way he works, saw the way he lifts up his teammates, like this is the defense talking about. We heard the fractions, we saw the fraction happen when the defense with the Bears was giving up fucking 10 points a game and the offense couldn't score more than 6. And it was just like, what more do we need to do for Mitch? Like, what more do we need to do for you? And we've kind of seen that the defense really cares and respects Justin Fields just as much as he respects them. And I think that's huge. I think that was a really interesting introspective moment about who Justin Fields is as an NFL quarterback and as a leader of the team.
But so I also think
it's great.
No,
I think it's great.
I agree. And the last thing there though, I also just think like he's one of those dudes that, at least as it stands, he may get paid big and turn into a diva. That's liable to happen to anyone once you get like fucking $400 million or whatever he's gonna get paid whenever that time comes. But I he's not going to be one of those dudes that throws anyone under the bus. I mean, like, look at what he had last year and in minicamp and everything. He's like, yeah, like I love EQ and I love these guys. And it's like, really? Because we don't. But he's never going to. Well, I don't want to say never again, but right now he's not that guy. So I think after that, because wasn't that the Miami game where he just went ballistic and was that the same game where he was apologizing? He feels like he could still win those games. He feels like, this is a one-score game. I'm supposed to be the franchise guy. This is on me. And he was wrong. It wasn't on him, but that's just the way he legitimately feels. Like, I don't think he's just getting up there apologizing after the defense fucking gave up another 30 ball. You know what I mean? Like, I legitimately think like you guys did enough, and I should have won the game still. Which is a great quality to have. But you're right. I think you're right. I think that was the moment. Maybe not the only moment, but that was like the one where they're like, Justin, stop, dude. Like, you did everything you could this game. Like, you're amazing. We need to do better. And that was when, they realized that that was when the buy-in started to come in. Because, I mean, even if it would have been deserved, what if he went up there and was like, you guys fucking suck. Like, you guys have to do better. Like, I'm doing all this. What if he were to reel off his stats? That would have gone off bad, even though he was right? You know what I mean? Like, so...
Like, a certain other quarterback with the New York Jets who may have blamed his team for their performance. If you recall, Zach Wilson did that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That got him benched.
Yeah. Well.
Weird. The other thing that Kevin Fishbane brought up was Khalil Herbert, his performance. Just kind of talking to Khalil Herbert to get his thoughts on how the Bears had handled the additions that they've made with Donta Foreman, Travis Homer, and drafting Roschon Johnson. Khalil Herbert basically said, yeah, it's the NFL. It's every team kind of does this now. You have multiple running backs. But it sounds like he's happy with the challenge. It sounds like he's ready to take that next step. And he said he wanted to get a stronger core and really improve his pass protection, which it sounds like that's something that he's been seriously working on. And Frank, I know you'll love this. He did boxing. He boxed. He wanted to work on his punch time. So
good.
Khalil Herbert understands that it's not just about running the football anymore in the NFL, right? It's being able to be versatile. You have to be able to catch the football. You have to be able to block, especially in this Bears offense. Frank, I got to be honest. Like David Montgomery leaving, you and I were kind of like, yeah, it is what it is. I kind of really like the Bears running back room right now. I kind of like where they're at.
I do as well. I still think they're missing a pass catcher from back there, unless Roschon Johnson is has the skill set that he just didn't show in college. But just as downhill, nasty power runners, that's a nice little three-headed monster. And I'm not expecting all three or maybe any of the three to have 1,000 yards. I think they spread the ball out pretty well. But I mean, it wouldn't shock me, because I still think they're going to be a run-heavy football team this year. I think they'll throw a little bit more than last year, but they're going to rely heavily on the run again, do some play-action stuff and get Justin out of the pocket. But it wouldn't shock me if all three of their numbers added up to 1,800 to 2,000 yards with a pretty even amount of touches between, well, especially between Herbert and what was the Jackie, names are evading me today. The signing that they made from Carolina.
Donta
Foreman. I think those two will definitely split carries, and then Roschon will be a third down guy. It sounds like he's already the best blocker, pass blocker of the group. So,
dude, they love Roschon Johnson. I've never seen a team love a running back more.
I haven't seen any prospect get this type of love. His college coaches, his opponents, the running back that got drafted in the first round. Like, everyone loves him. Everyone loves him. And how can that be a bad thing?
Yeah.
So,
agreed.
No, but I agree with you. I really like the running back room, and we'd be remiss to not bring up the RB1, Justin Fields. So really excited about what they got going on.
Listen, Frankie, we were I was in a dynasty draft, and I got Donta Foreman in like the 15th round. I feel like I might have gotten the starter for the Bears running back room. Like, I think people are sleeping a little too hard on our guy Donta. I know people are excited about Khalil Herbert, especially outside of Chicago. We've talked about it a couple times. I think, Khalil Herbert, I think he's like averaging like over 5.5 yards per carry as an NFL running back, which is phenomenal. But he just doesn't have like that top end burst. Like he can escape, but he can't really finish that well. I'm hoping maybe we'll see a little bit more of that this year as he gets more opportunities. Because again, and something else we need to see is, can Luke Getsy utilize multiple running backs in the same offense? Because that was one thing you and I were kind of getting frustrated with Luke Getsy towards the end of the year, was like, we'd seen such good play from Khalil Herbert, and then David Montgomery comes back from being injured, and it's just all David Montgomery all the time. Now, granted, a lot of that was what you were talking about, the pass protection. The team would get down by a ton, and they would just need to throw the ball. So we'll see if there's a little bit more versatility, more even split amongst those running backs. So I think that'll be interesting to see. The very last thing Kevin Fishbain talked about was Cody Whitehair. We thought there was a chance that Cody Whitehair might not even be on the team. He is actually, I believe, going to be a captain this year as the starting center. Now, granted, he still could be a cap casualty. I doubt it will happen. It sounds, they didn't draft a center. They didn't sign a center. It sounds like this is kind of the direction that they want to go. Frankie, how do you feel about Cody Whitehair being your center? Are you still a little bit concerned about it?
Due to injuries, yeah. But I knew it was going to be a thing as soon as the Bears didn't draft one. As soon as we passed up on the couple that we really liked, we were sort of texting back and forth thinking that it was going to be, the Bears' next pick's going to be a center, and it just didn't happen. It only makes sense. Like, you're going to drop him and do what? Get like another undrafted guy, and you have another Sam Mustipher. I know Lucas Patrick is still there, but it sounds like they're dead set on him being the backup at this point. But but which to me only provides really good depth. I know he didn't play great at guard last year, but if there is an injury there, he can plug in there. Or if Whitehair gets hurt for whatever reason, like he has been, that's a really good backup to have. So, I mean, the writing was on the wall there. I wasn't expecting anything more or less, but I do think that's where the Bears having so much cap space plays in their favor, because people were even talking about Eddie Jackson. They were like, if he was on almost any other team, he would have been a cap casualty. He's making way too much money for the way he's performed the last couple of years. You can probably say the same thing for Cody Whitehair. His performance has dropped off the last 2-3 seasons, but you have all this cap, and it's like, why just get rid of someone and have dead money? Let's plug this hole for another year and then continue to draft, just positions that are in much worse places than center. So not surprising at all, but it actually, Jack, it leads to my question of you, and you can answer your own as well, because this is the only thing that I came to the episode with. Isn't it a little bit weird that a 3-win team essentially has no camp battles at all? There's not a single camp battle going into this camp or the preseason or anything. Like, that would have been the one that I would have thought, Lucas Patrick versus Whitehair, but they're essentially giving Whitehair the job. Yeah. Kevin Jenkins is a lock at left guard. The corners seem to be set after the Tyreek Stevenson. I think there would have been a little bit of a battle had they not drafted one. Safeties are set. Who is fighting for anything? Maybe like lower end, like Velus Jones maybe on the bubble. You know what I mean? Like, there's something to that, but like, there are no battles, and that's like, I don't ever remember this being a thing for a team that just only won 3 games.
Yeah, I would say probably the depth positions. Maybe the highest profile one is going to be corner 2, Tyreek Stevenson and Terrell Smith. The other maybe being the edge rusher between Travis Gibson and Dominique Robinson. Travis Gibson, Bears sound very high on him still, to see if maybe a year, a full off season in this, another full off season, I should say, in this spot, hand in the dirt, things like that. Can he get back to being the type of prospect that he was originally drafted as? Maybe the Noah Sewell, Jack Sanborn.
That may be the one. Yep.
That
You're
one
right.
right there.
I forgot about them.
I know that Sanborn was he missed some practice. He might be hurt a little bit still. We'll see. I apologize. Kevin Fishbane actually had a couple more things. He basically just Tyreek Stevenson picking off Justin Fields. John Hoke, really liked him. Terrell Smith, talked about him as well. They really like Terrell Smith, man. He might be a sleeper in terms of
he was a fifth rounder.
5th round pick out of Minnesota.
Maybe they just have an infatuation with 5th rounders. Braxton Jones, and now
that might just be their sweet spot.
Yeah.
Noah Sewell was a 5th round pick.
Yep.
Darnell Mooney was a 5th round pick. That just Travis Gibson was a 5th round pick. Maybe that's just where they make their money in the 5th round.
But I mean, even the interior, Javon and the other defensive Zach Pickens. It sounds like they're pretty slated to be depth guys, at least right now, because it sounds like
Billings and Justin
behind
Jones.
Billings and Justin Jones. I mean, they've been very impressed with Billings from what I've heard. So
yeah, well, he's gigantic.
I mean, we knew what we were getting. I mean, that's the run stuffer. That is the Ted Washington of the Lovie Smith days.
And then the last thing, Frank, is the new kickoff rule. For if you didn't know this, Bears fans didn't know, the Bears actually voted against this new kickoff rule. It allows returners to call for a fair catch, and the ball will be set at the 25-yard line. Richard Hightower, the special teams, he said he didn't want to get into it. He's just trying to figure it out strategically. What do you think about this rule, Frank? What do you think about the NFL basically completely nixing the fair catch rule? Because it sounds like you can kind of just call a fair catch like the 2, and it would still be a 25. You'll still get the ball at the 25-yard line. What do you think about the kickoff rule? And how do you think it might impact the Bears given their return specialists?
So I felt the exact same way when they started to take away the wedge blocking and even like moving it up 5 yards or 10 yards, whatever it was, where the kicker kicks from. The wedge blocks, get rid of those. I was all on board. Anytime you can limit the amount of head injuries that are on the field, go for it. And there was a lot of studies and things, right, that a lot of the head trauma was coming on special teams. Like that was where the bulk of it was coming from in that time. But we're at the point now, it's like, why aren't we just coming to this natural conclusion and just taking the kickoff away, starting every team at the 20 or the 25? Right? Like what, like, it's going to suck. It's going to, get specialists out of jobs and things, but it sort of is what it is at this point. I mean, like, punting is still there, so your return guy, he would just be your punt returner, but just get rid of it, man. Like, what? Why is it still here? You're trying to make it safe to a point where it's essentially non-existent. Because, like, they're just, when you watch from a week to week on a week to week basis, these kickers now can kick the ball so fucking far that for the first 12 weeks of the season, they're all kicking out of the end zone. You don't really get returns until their legs are fatigued, or like maybe late in games you'll get a couple because their legs are fatigued if they kicked a few field goals or whatever. But like, just get rid of it, man. Like, what? Why are we delaying this? That's where this is going. It's gonna be gone within the next 5 to 10 years. So let's just do it.
Yeah, and I think it really hurts a guy like Velus Jones and his ability to make an impact on this football team unless he's ultimately improved as a wide receiver specifically. Again, it's you can choose to do a fair catch or not, so it's not like it's being forced on you. But it really devalues a guy like Velus Jones.
Yep.
A guy who's already fighting to make the team now that they drafted another wide receiver. They have a guy who's a little bit more versatile in Dante Pettis when it comes to punt returning. Like, unless Velus can improve his punt returning skills, which something he really struggled with, what value does he have on the Bears roster if the kickoffs don't really even matter at that point?
Well, I mean, that would call for probably a union conversation of like severance packages, right? Like, guys who that is their role, you'd have to like buy their contract out or something of the sort. Something like that would have to happen, I would assume. They don't unionize for no reason. But no, you're right, and that's what I was saying. Like, it's gonna suck for people who, what would that have done to Devin Hester back in the day? He still would have been a phenomenal kick returner. We know that.
I just never called for a fair catch.
Well, no, right. But the fair catch thing, of course. But I'm just saying, like, when it does end, because their kickoffs are gonna not be a thing. It is what it is. So yeah, I don't know.
It's wild that like. So literally anywhere you call for a fair catch, it could be literally on the 2-yard line, and you get the ball at the 25-yard line. That's crazy. That's crazy to me.
That to me is also kind of stupid though, because more times than not, if you catch the ball at the 2 on a kickoff, it was a line drive kick. Like, you're not popping that up that way. That's the time to take the ball. But you're going to get past the 25 probably if you're a solid returner. You know what I mean? So, but no, I guess I didn't touch on what I thought about the actual rule. I sort of skipped over it and talked about how I think it just, it needs to come to an end. But the rule itself is very dumb. I'm having a hard time understanding what this does. They're probably framing it in the, with the player safety in mind. But again, that's what led me to, like, if that's your point, just take it away. Just take kickoffs away if you want, players to be more safe.
Yeah, and outside of that was pretty much it from the OTA article. It sounds like the Bears are in a good spot. They have it sounds like seemingly they're happy with their depth, especially in the defensive back area, which, like, hopefully, because we need these guys to hit, they need to be impact players so that the Bears can start focusing on the defensive line this next offseason, which is still crucial. There's a couple names out there that have been floating around. The Bears might be interested in going to get a guy like Chase Young. Sounds like Ron Rivera still looks at him as a starter for their team, as a potential future player. But like that specifically, the Commanders have just spent so much fucking money on. They're like the exact opposite of the. If we could just have the Commanders' defensive line on the Bears, this team would probably win 10 games.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree. Yeah. Fuck. If you just go out and get Chase Young, that may change the total landscape of what's happening if he can stay healthy, of course. But I mean, that's what that defense is missing is a pass rush right now.
It's a good time to be a Bears fan, Frank. I appreciate the optimism. There's always like that hint of like you're just kind of reaching not at quite the end of the tunnel of the rebuild, but you're starting to see the light, right? And there's things to really be excited about. And I know a lot of Bears fans still think it all comes down to Justin Fields, which I think is absolutely correct. But I don't know how you could be upset about what Ryan Poles has done to give Justin Fields the opportunity to prove that he is the leader. He is the franchise quarterback moving forward. You potentially are going to have 2 top 10 picks in the first round again. Bears are set up for some success.
Dude,
Frank.
could you imagine? Could you imagine if the Panthers are just awful, we get the first pick again?
Listen, I know people are excited about their roster for some reason. Maybe not excited. Maybe excited isn't the right word to use, but they did add some NFL talent, right? Adam Thielen, DJ Chark, who I know you really like, Miles Sanders. They've had a good, they had a good defense last year. Their offensive line was improved. I just don't see how that team is going to be that good. Like, I think people are overrating Frank Reich, and this is coming from a guy who really liked Frank Reich in his time with Indianapolis. But I mean, you just look at Bryce Young, man. Like, he's so small.
He's very small. He's very small. I mean, I don't think they're gonna have, unless injuries are crazy, I don't think they're gonna have the first pick. I still think they're a way better team than Arizona.
The Cardinals are gonna have the first and possibly the second overall pick.
Probably, yeah. But a man can dream.
A man can dream.
The Panthers, they should get us in the top 10. And then the Bears would probably be right outside the top 10. Maybe 15, 14.
Unless Justin takes that step and this team just explodes and this team just ends up being a 12-win football team.
Well, I mean, could you imagine you win the Super Bowl, you get the 32nd pick, and then you have like a top, I mean, just what the Eagles just did. They lost.
I was literally just going to say, gee, if only a
you
team
get number
had just
5 or something, that'd be crazy.
I would just, like, first of all, we get to see it this year regardless, as long as injuries don't happen. But a Patrick Mahomes, Justin Fields Super Bowl, I think would just be incredible. And if the Bears do beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, like, we never have to talk about not having Patrick Mahomes ever again. That's something to look forward to.
Well, I mean, we won't. Will the national media ever shut the fuck up about it?
If Justin Fields beats Patrick Mahomes in a Super Bowl, I think that'll take care of that conversation.
I would hope so, but they're inept. They talk about the same things every single fucking year.
You know who doesn't do that, Frank? The Bear With Us podcast.
You're goddamn right. The guy on the right.
The guy on the right. The guy who won't stop wearing those fucking headphones that break the brain. Sorry, again, apologize. But we do appreciate everybody for listening. As always, this has been the Bear With Us podcast. We'll be back next week to talk a little bit more football. Depends. We'll see. Maybe the jersey conversation will happen because I've been thinking about it nonstop, Frank.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Nonstop. The Seahawks just announced they're wearing their 90s throwbacks with like the light blue and the silver pants and the, that.
Do I know that jersey?
You should, because it was the Curtis Martin jerseys. I think even Sean Alexander may have worn them back in the day too.
I got to see him. I don't remember.
I could be wrong, but you do have to see him. Anyways, we appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you guys next week. Later, Frankie.
Later, Jackie. Later, everybody.